DockTalk's Captain's Corner. And today we have on Julie, who is one of our most loved, endeared captains of the whole captain program. You're my favorite. I say that to every captain that comes. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I really enjoy speaking with you. I'm so excited to have you on, just where we can chat. But let me introduce Julie. And I say that to every captain. But no, okay, sorry. Had another newbie faux pas. Have the live stream over on another screen. Anyway, so Julie, welcome. So Julie Lerman is Microsoft Regional Director, Docker Captain, and a longtime Microsoft MVP who counts her years of coding in decades. Yeah, so she makes her living as a coach and consultant on software teams around the world. You can find her presenting on the Entity Framework, DDD, domain-driven design, and other topics at user groups and conferences. She also blogs over at the Data Forum, thedatafarm.com, and I'll post that here in a bit, /blog. She's also a published author of a very highly acclaimed book called Programming Entity Frameworks, and then also contributes to the MSDN magazine. So welcome, Julie. Super excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hello, Peter. Sorry, the usual distance, COVID.
I know.
So glad that we're able to do stuff like this anyway.
I know it's not the same, but I guess it's what we have for now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably mentioned this before, maybe to you or others on the show, but yeah, I'm usually when I'm traveling, I'm like, oh God, I got to travel again, but I'm missing it. I'm missing traveling. I'm missing seeing people. I'm missing sharing a meal and a drink.
It's the getting there part.
Exactly.
The drag. Right.
Exactly.
But once you're there, it's like you forget everything. You forget about your family. You forget everything.
Yeah.
Just like in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Airports are no fun. No fun at all. And there's some specific airports that I just really don't enjoy. There's some that are fun that have really good food in the airports. Austin has a great restaurants in the airport. I'm telling you, they do. They have best tacos, best barbecue.
I will just keep my mouth shut about,
It can go down a bad road.
Favorite airport.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you and get to know you a little bit. So when did you get started in tech? I know in the bio you talked decades. So
you're right off the bat. You want to ask me how old I am?
No. I'm sorry.
I'm kidding.
No. How did you get started?
I have been programming for over 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm old.
I'm right. Don't worry. I'm right behind you. Like 24 or something like that. 25. Yeah. How'd you get started? Did you do a traditional, computer science?
Actually, I did take one programming class in college. I went to a small liberal arts college, and we're talking about the 1980s here. So it wasn't like, we have comp sci classes all over the place.
Right.
But they did have the two math teachers, the Shalepskis, Carol and Mr. and Mrs. Shalepsky.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. And, this is interesting because it was an all women's college at the time. And, a lot of the professors were women. And here was the math professor. It was like, it wasn't unusual, right? It was like, oh yeah. And then they built, the two of them, they built computer Heath kits from kits. They built computers and started having computer classes.
Yeah, cool.
Started teaching basic programming in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Everybody's like doing the math now about how old I really am. And so I just took that one basic class back then. And then after I graduated college, I thought I was going to go into the movie business, blah, blah, blah. I moved to New York
Wait. Acting or
no.
Writing? What?
Yeah, I was like a kind of a film nerd. Anyway, so, that didn't happen. But I moved to New York City, and then I ended up at a large magazine publishing company. There was 1,000 people there and one computer. And that computer got on my desk pretty quickly because I was always in there helping the guy figure out how to do stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And that was really, and I was self-taught for many, many years. So that really was how, those were my little ways in, right? And then as they started to get more computers in this company, everybody was coming to me asking me how to make it do what they wanted it to do. And I just always had this way of figuring things out. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just
Cool.
kind of went on from there.
Yeah. And that's
Before the internet.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The same thing when I started. I was always interested in computers growing up and programming and stuff, but then I went away from them. And then when I went into the Coast Guard, when I got out, I was going back to
Oh,
school.
cool.
Yeah. And same thing. My dad was, he had a steel company that he was running, and he had a consultant that was there. And for whatever reason, he couldn't do any more work for the steel company. So my dad said, "Oh, you like computers? You should come work for me and program these things." And I'm
Oh,
like,
that's so cool.
"Okay." And probably the best thing looking back that my dad could have done, because I said, I don't, I don't really know, but and he said, "Well, you'll figure it out." And I did. And so I had that liberty, so I was lucky to get that. But
Yeah, there was no plural site.
no plural, yeah,
No Udemy,
yeah.
right?
I had a stack of AOL CDs, at home, right? That was the internet back then. The American remember those? You get they started bulk shipping these CDs and you got charged by the hour.
CDs. Okay, so
Yeah,
not when I started.
yeah. Yeah, so you you drop this CD, this American Online CD in and sign up, and you got
Oh,
500
right.
hours.
America Online, right? Yep.
Yeah, the AOL.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. They were still sending my dad those CDs like 5 years ago.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I like that. Coast Guard. That was the first step to Docker. That was somebody's message in the chat.
Yes. Yep.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because a lot of times when we talk to other people, especially, I think it's, people those young people in their 40s
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, I got a is it TRS 80, TR 80, TR."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, "Oh yeah, I had one of those," and like that was, I was already, yeah. But that's where a lot of people started out,
Yep.
like getting those when they were kids.
Yeah, my dad was he was an accountant, a CPA, but he was always a techie. Started with you might have done this. Did you nerd out on calculators? Right. So he had these big
Yes,
programming calculators.
the HP kind
Yeah.
of scientific ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
when I was in high school, so we're talking like,
In the 2000s.
the big four computers. When I was in high school, was it, I think it was even like 10th grade or something like that. Maybe a senior, I can't even remember. But that was the thing. There was a lab that had this, on the shelf, there was like 4 of those HP calculators, those big ones. And that was like one of the things that super nerdy kids were working on. I don't remember what we did on it, but we, it was something related to our math class.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was like a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
we were the
Cool kids.
socially then, maybe not so, respected, but still.
Yeah.
We were doing the cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I'm interested to hear kind of your story, how you went from a lot of .NET and the entity framework and data, more from a developer's perspective, correct? Not so much like database admin administrator, but then how you, how you got involved with Docker, how you started using Docker. Like how did Docker show up on your radar?
Well, certainly hearing about it a lot. But then, this is from people like Michelle LaRue Bustamante and people who are really, really understanding DevOps stuff. I mean, well, Michelle's like, architect and everything, but, she was, container, but, you're really hearing about Docker a lot, but I was really daunted by it because it really did feel so much like it was for people who do DevOps, and I couldn't wrap my head around. I mean, I was weak enough as it was on the whole virtual machine thing, but I couldn't wrap my head around the leap from virtual machine to Docker, right? That they aren't the same. It was really hard for me to understand that.
Right.
So the hook, and I actually used this because it was my hook. I used this hook to try to help others who are in my boat. So I'm not a DBA, but I do a lot with data access, especially, that's been my whole thing with the entity framework, is about getting in and out of the data.
Right.
And then when .NET became cross-platform, somebody on the entity framework team started doing little demos on a MacBook. And I was like, instead of just saying it's cross-platform, I want to see what it's like. So I bought my first MacBook, right?
Yeah.
So now I got a MacBook, and I work on that a lot. I have spent a lot of time sitting on my couch when we're, hanging out at night watching TV, just using it, just doing even like Twitter and email and stuff, just to get used to like what it's like working a MacBook.
Yeah.
So downside of MacBook was, I'm so used to using SQL Server, like when I'm doing my coding, that's, SQL Server, like local DB, right? I could use SQLite on the Mac, but not everything was everything's not always the same. So I wanted to use SQL Server, and then the SQL Server team put SQL Server. Well, they created SQL Server for Linux,
right,
and then put it in Docker. Created an image, a Docker image.
There you go.
Right. Yeah. So I was like,
what is this?
Right.
What is this?
So I downloaded the image. I live out in the boonies, and my internet's really slow. So the image was like, I don't know, 12 gigabytes or something back then when it first started. But I downloaded the image, right? Wait. Then I did Docker run, and it was up and running.
Yeah.
And I was just
mind-blown.
because I have installed SQL Server enough times. Right. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So I started working with it from that perspective, but then, then I started wanting to tell that story. Like I find, as I not just using it at that minimal level, but just starting to really understanding what it is, like that it's not a virtual machine and what it's doing. And then I was starting to I would propose talks to conferences just to help people who are coming from that, we're programmers. We have to interact with databases, even though we're not DBAs, right? But we do interact with databases. So again, there's the hook. They understand that. They understand the pain of installing SQL Server.
Yeah.
So that was really it. And then, and then on from there.
Then it progressed from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that story is very, I think people find they go down that same path. I know I did same thing when I heard about Docker, right, and containers, and I'm like, we have VMs. Well, I don't get it, right? And then once I really understood what the differences were, I was like, oh, okay. And same thing. I started with a database running Mongo locally. Oh, Docker run is up. Oh, wait, and I can run different versions? Well, this is okay.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. Yeah, and I was on a Mac likewise, right? And running the Linux version, running the Linux image. Was mind-blowing, right? Like, okay, this is pretty cool. Yeah. So my story is very similar to kind of stumbling into it and going, oh, here's a new shiny object, whatever, right? And
it's a very different perspective than coming from the business angle, which is, about, you still have to, like SQL Server, you still have to pay for licenses, but but just about the licensing and the fact that you don't have to have a lot of machines. I know, well, we could do that with virtual machines, but it's even different than that, because you don't have to run 20 virtual machines and have 20 Windows licenses. You can run one Windows operating system and then throw 20 running containers on top of it.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a big deal also.
Okay, cool. I'm going to come back to that. In a second, because that's one of my questions, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But you mentioned Microsoft and open source and cross-platform. And so how long have you been an MVP, and like, have you seen that transition with Microsoft? And I'd like to just get your thoughts. And I know you're not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, but I'd love to see hear your thoughts on that. Right.
Yes. So there is one thing that I do want to be sure is clear before I move on. Not speaking on behalf of Microsoft. So this Microsoft regional director, you asked me that the other day, like, what is that? So the joke among Microsoft regional directors is we don't work for Microsoft. We don't have a region. We don't direct anything. It's a title. It's kind of like an MVP, but it's on a different level than MVP.
Right.
It's trusted. We're actually really considered as trusted resources to Microsoft.
Yeah, it's like being a Docker captain. Little like Docker captain here, and then like maybe regional director down. Right? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh,
but
okay.
The pay is the same.
What's that?
The pay is the same.
The pay is the same. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, but that's cool. I mean, but you're recognized from your peers in the MVP probably that say, and get a little extra status. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Okay.
So, back to
Microsoft open source.
Microsoft open source.
Their story.
And, yeah. So, yeah, and I've been an MVP for like, I don't know, 17 or 18 years or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And that's something that, is just a once a year thing. So I've been, kind of pat on the back each of those times, which is very nice. And anyway, so it has been amazing watching this transformation over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
With open source. And, sometimes people forget, but I really, really want to always shout out to the one person who really started pushing open source within Microsoft, which is Scott Hanselman.
Yeah.
Right. He was really, really pushing in that direction, and look at it now. It's just amazing. I mean, all of .NET is on GitHub, and so much more that they're creating. Not everything, obviously, they can't give away the bank, right? But so much is there. And it's not just that they're doing it in the open, but also the community involvement and, pull requests, anything from documentation, which is really an interesting way for people to get involved in open source. Like, you don't have to worry about building code even, right? But even that kind of contribution is powerful, but it's a nice step in. So all their documentation is on GitHub. So, they're from, issues, but it's this interesting combination of them building things in such a transparent way and being so much more involved in the community. And now, of course, with, all of us locked in our houses and shut away from each other, they're doing so much more transparently, even more. Like, they're having these stand-ups, and like even the entity framework team, who I'm more involved with, they're doing bi-weekly stand-ups.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Right? Like, so everybody's doing that. Yes, Crazy Max. Kudos to Microsoft for that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'm looking over going, blink, blink, seeing this.
Yeah. 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 And to, I remember when they weren't like that, right? I mean, they were, Microsoft was out to crush, competition. Everybody that was, not, if you weren't running on the Microsoft platform, proprietary platform, right?
And paying for it.
Yeah. And paying for it.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a huge change. I grew up in the industry. I was a .NET. I was a VB developer. I was a Visual C++ developer.
Oh, not C++, but it was VB.
Yeah, those were dark days. But I thought it was, it was a young.
I still have to support a VB6 application.
Yeah, I love VB6.
And this is at one time, like, I should be proud that it's still running a company, but oh my God, I'm still supporting a FoxPro 2.6 application.
Ooh, yeah.
So I go from working in this 25-year-old code base to working with bleeding edge stuff that hasn't even been released yet. Like, I can do that in a span of an hour.
Yeah.
Like,
hey, Julie,
curled your hair.
that's where the 30 years of experience and knowledge, right, and wisdom that gives you. Yeah, I mean, like, but like, no, not a lot of people can do that, right? So that's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful.
Quick basic.
Yep.
Yeah,
Quick
quick
basic.
basic.
Okay, we can't leave that up there. We want to.
Speaking of which, Scott Hanselman again yesterday tweeted something about, oh, remember how awesome it was to order cassette tapes from Columbia Records back in the day?
What, for $1 and you'd sign up and they just
And get like 30 tapes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your parents this happened to me, and then your parents find out, oh, that subscription goes to like, I don't know, $25 a month after or something like that. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I have so I switched over to a Mac. I was a big I got into JavaScript and Node, right? And so I went to the Mac because it was the Linux that I wanted, right? It had the nice GUI, but still BSD underneath, right? And then Node came out. So I've been on forever, for 2008, whatever, on a Mac. And now with Docker, all in on Windows and all the great things are WSL2, right? It's like, hey, I need a Windows machine. I need
whatever, wherever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, and man, it's a really nice environment. Like you, I have to stay on it to, just to get my cut, copy, and paste. It's not the control. It's the, what is the command key on the Mac, and then it's control on Windows.
Well, have you ever, let's see. So I have my setup I'm working with here. 2 monitors, a keyboard and mouse. That's all plugged into a big honking Windows CPU, right? But sometimes I'll bring my Mac down. I'll use like remote desktop into the Mac, but then I'm using the Windows keyboard to run the Mac, and then I flip back over. It's just it's so confusing.
I don't know. We should get Microsoft and Apple in the same room and say, can you just standardize on the
there's something nice about feeling like you're in this operating system and feeling like you're in that operating system.
And I'm a purist. I don't remap my keys. I know folks that remap their keys, right?
Pardon me, I'm just like, you probably noticed I have had a little bit of a runny nose, so I was just wiping my nose with
no worries.
Kleenex instead of my
okay, so
I have to,
like a girl. No worries. So we talk about Microsoft, but I'd also like to hear from kind of what you've seen with Docker and its changes, right? And more so on maybe the Microsoft side in that community, right? I think Docker was born out of Linux OS, right? Forgive me for the internet. Yes, I know containers and things like that were pre-existing, and Docker didn't invent containers, but Docker was running on Linux. But so
Microsoft just totally embraced that.
Yeah.
I mean, look at on Azure. I mean, like AWS Cloud, they have support containers, they support Docker, they support Kubernetes, but they also each have their own container management system as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's just totally that. And then, thinking about, talking about Microsoft with the tooling, right? Visual Studio on Windows totally has all this support for Docker tooling.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the extensions for Visual Studio Code, which are amazing.
Yes.
And I'm sure the same exists for JetBrains Rider and all of those also. But it's kind of like having those tools also embrace GitHub, like doing Git.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really important. I had to take this journey with both Git and with Docker. I needed to work with it at the command line first to really understand it. But then there's a bunch of nuances that are, confusing, tricky, etc. And it's really nice to have the tooling just support them. I actually did yesterday with the newest version of Visual Studio 2019. They just had their big release of all the new stuff,
Yeah.
.NET 5, Indie Framework Core 5, ASP.NET Core 5, and the update to Visual Studio 2019 that supports all of that. And I'm working on a Pluralsight course, and just keeping I have all these, as the course evolves, I have all these different demos, right? So I have all these branches, and I used I had some conflicting stuff, and usually when I have a problem, I just literally copy and paste and start again. I can't deal with conflicts, and cherry picking is so confusing. And the tooling, actually, the new tooling made it really, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. Like I kind of, and I did it in a way that I understood what I was doing, but the tooling really handheld me. And so, I mean, they're doing that same thing for Docker. I mean, even Docker Compose, right? Like it's a lot of it is built in. So the most basic things you need to do, it'll handhold you through. If you need to do some more advanced stuff, you go out to the command line.
Yeah. I think so. I mentor on the side folks going from another career into software engineering, and I'm a little bit harsh on them. I make them, everybody get out of VS Code, no Visual Studio, no plugins, and work in a Sublime, a text editor, basic text editor. And let you get color coding in Sublime. Come on, it's that's all you need. But and work on the terminal, right? And so you can understand the tools at a base level, right? And then I tell them, okay, now you earned the right to go move up into a GUI. But I don't know, right? I'm not set in that. It's just the way I do it, because I think there's value in learning things very quickly, right? And then going the other way, right? Starting high level and then drilling down, instead of, okay, I got to learn all the details first, and then I'll abstract up. But I think what's key, and Microsoft always does this well, and we're aiming to do that here at Docker, is to allow you to go up and down that abstraction level very easily, right? I think that's key, right? So
because everybody has their own way of absorbing that information.
Yeah.
And I feel that for me, like, whether it was Docker or Git, learning it at the command line helped me understand what was going on. And that's the way I think. I need to understand how things are working. Not everybody needs to or cares to. It's just like, I just need to get it to work. I got to get my job done.
Right.
But for me, the more I understand how something's working, then when something goes wrong, I'm bringing a lot more of my own tools to the table.
Yeah.
My understanding to the table to try to solve that problem.
Yep. The big brain you got there. Yeah. Crazy Max. I put this up before. I remember Notepad++. FFS. I'm not. Oh, that's probably
that's for say that's.
Oh.
Yeah.
How dare you, Crazy Max?
Saying for crying out loud.
Okay. We'll go with the PC version. Yeah.
Except that's more. Crazy Max, that's more how I talk too.
Yeah.
I don't have kids, so I am like a total potty mouth, but I try really hard to keep it reined in.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Andre, I agree. The GUI can, I don't know. I'm trying to fight against being the old cranky, salty, back in my day, No,
you have to be generous. Like, not everybody learns in the same way. Not everybody wants to have that knowledge. Sometimes they just, if you've got a good tool that does the job well.
Yes.
And that is not your primary job, right? It's just it's a side that, I'm writing code. This is what's going on now with Docker and the integration with the CLI integration with Azure and AWS. Like, I'm writing code. I do need to get it deployed, but I don't want to learn all this other stuff, right? And like, if you already know how to do this, let's just let's let you use that tool and just give you a little more power with it, right? It's the same kind of thing. But again, I think it's just as a tool creator, being flexible enough to enable other people to use your tools in the way that works for them the best.
Yeah.
And helps them get the job done.
Yeah.
Right. And as Andre says, GUI is good. Okay. But when you really need to support something, you need to understand what's happening under the hood. So there's a point at which, if that's not really your job, maybe if you're on a team, there's somebody there who's got that expertise, right? So not everybody has to have that expertise on all levels.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying that I mean, I agree. I'm somebody who wants to know that stuff, but there's a point at which, I'm not worrying about if I can support a printer, right? Like I can solve printer problems. Right.
Yeah.
Like just have somebody who understands that, somebody who is interested in that. I won't build computers. I tried once, was not a good idea. Everybody's like, oh yeah, get all the parts. I bought the wrong parts. We got that fixed. I got all the right parts. The boxes sat on the table for a month, right? Like most normal nerds would be like ripping into them the first day. It took me 8 hours to build it. Everybody's like, oh, it'll take you an hour, right? It's just not my thing, right?
Yeah.
And so why should I have to be expert at every single thing? So even as a developer, it's not that it's too big. This is one of the reasons, back in the old days, in the 80s and the early 90s, I wrote entire applications all by myself, right? You can't do that anymore. It's not, it's not feasible to have an expertise across that board. So you pick and choose, right? If you've got that, if you're in a position where that's okay to do. And I know I've got friends, again, Michelle LaRue Bustamante, she and some others built a company called Soliance. These three, they're so smart. They're so smart, but they can't do all the things and they can't be expert in all the things. So what they do is they bring in, like I've gone in and helped, they've hired me to just spend some hours working on, something entity framework, or they'll, like they build a team of experts across their networking. So, and I know not everybody has that ability to do that either. But the point is, it shouldn't have to be expected to be an expert in every single thing. Okay. Back off my soapbox.
No. I think it's a great point, right? I think it's a great point. And I made that mistake when I was younger, but that's my temperament, right? My person, I'm like a natural researcher and studier, right? So I want to know everything about I can,
and
right?
God forbid you should humiliate yourself and ask somebody a question.
Yeah, no, we won't go.
You know what happens, right?
Yeah.
How normal is this? You'll run into a problem. You spend, you're like, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure it out, because who doesn't want to try to figure it out themselves, right? And then hours go by and you got 800 tabs open, and maybe just this one other thing. You go, you're eating dinner and you go, oh, another idea. Like, I'm not going to ask, because if you ask, somebody's just going to say, oh, did you do this? Like, duh. So I will spend 2 days, and finally I'll get on Twitter and email lists. I'm like, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to think I didn't do my due diligence, that I didn't look. They're going to ask me 100 questions of things I already tried. But I'm going to ask anyway. And you hit send, and all of a sudden you have an idea, and that's it. I'm like, shit, I didn't have to ask.
Or even just typing it out, right? You're like,
but,
now I know what I need to do.
I need to listen to myself too, right? The whole thing, like, you shouldn't have to be expected to be expert, right? So here I am wasting 2 days, where somebody who happens to know that might like just be able to answer the question in 1 minute, and I wasted 2 days because of my ego.
And we need to try and do better on some of the platforms on the internet of like. Yes, we want to encourage folks to do your research, do your due diligence. Like, please don't just post, hey, my Docker file doesn't work, or I'm getting there's so much that we have to know to try and
definition of it doesn't work. I don't know how many times I've had to ask that question.
But at the same time, don't go off for 2 weeks and not ask, right? It's that balance, right? Of finding that balance of asking a good question and I get beat up by this by some of my colleagues, right? I'm like, yeah, there are bad questions, but I mean, yes, like, because if you, with the Google machine and the Stack Overflow, right, you can find a lot of stuff, but it's also, you got to be careful, right? Because if you just become a copy and paster out of Stack Overflow and don't really know what's going on, kind of back earlier, going back to our earlier conversation and going up and down that, that stack, right? Of like, you have to know what's going on, but you want to still stay higher, right? So
yeah,
you
when
still have
I
to figure out something.
go to or send people to Stack Overflow to look for help, I always look to see who it is that's provided the answer.
Yeah.
Like, or, if there are like 300 thumbs up on them, like, okay, I can trust this. But if it's just like kind of a complicated question and somebody comes along and says, oh, do this, this, that, I'm like, okay, I just want to be sure that this is somebody who, I can trust to follow this information. I mean, generally, it's, I don't mean that it has to be a famous person.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just mean, if I can just go and like, just do a little stalking, see who that, that person's, they're this, or they have this experience. Okay. I can trust that.
Yeah. we get this one a lot. Yeah. I've gotten that before. There was an error. What did it say? I closed it.
Oh, I taught a client how to do screenshots.
Yeah. And I can't get it to happen again. Right. I don't know. I can't get it. Okay.
Or how about when somebody has a problem over and over and over again, and then they like a client, they ask you, right? Like, oh, we got this problem, we can't figure it out. And I'm like, okay, I'll get on your computer, let's do a remote session. And then they're like, I can't make it happen.
Yeah.
It happened 100 times in a row, I swear.
I promise.
Can't make it happen. And I'm like, they know mom's here.
Yeah.
It knows.
Yeah.
It's not going to do that to me.
Behave. Yeah. 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 But if anybody, I do want to be, we're talking about our war stories a little bit, but yeah, definitely. Cause we've gone through it too, right? I know I've asked horrible questions, right? And to your point, like I've asked questions like, oh crap, I know the answer already. Like I knew that. Yeah. So please don't be afraid to answer questions, but yeah, do your research, try and figure it out. Cause it enables you to ask a better question too, right? To really get to the issue.
You can often learn a lot along the way too.
Yeah.
When you do that little bit of research, especially if you're like so many of us, like you end up going down a rabbit hole of fascinating things and you just learn all this other stuff. But
yeah, you never come back.
I mean, it's a balance. It's a balance. And when people who have are working for somebody else and they're on a schedule, right? Then the balance changes of priorities in terms of answering that question. Hopefully you've got, you can lean on other people on your team. You can do some pair programming. 2 heads are better than 1, even if somebody else doesn't know that answer. Sometimes working together on solving it, like you have different ways of thinking and you come to a solution more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of questions, I get this question asked all the time and I have my answer, which it's changed a lot. But anyways, I'd love to ask you this. Should we run our databases in containers?
Oh, that is an interesting question. And I've actually, so I'm not going to say yes or no.
Yeah, I was going to say the good answer is it depends.
Get that out there. So I don't want you to think I'm waffling.
Yeah.
Because, I am not a DBA. I'm not the kind of person who administers databases and has to worry about the kinds of things that a database administrator needs to be concerned with. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've actually had this conversation with people from Microsoft, the people on the SQL Server team. And one of the interesting things that they said was, we used to ask that question about virtual machines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So over time, the question will probably go away about containers.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, okay, now I'm going to put on my architect hat so that I can say, well, it depends.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it does depend. I mean, if you look at like, if you're talking about something big, even like Kubernetes has all kinds of stuff for SQL Server containers built in for managing and making sure things don't fall apart. But these are things that I'm being told by other experts. This is not my own experience. And again, because that is not my level of expertise with a database.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, I kind of still feel like I need it on metal.
Yeah.
Whether it's my metal or cloud metal.
Yeah. I agree. And I agree with you.
Cloud metal isn't metal anyway.
Yeah. It's and Andre was at him. He said, no. No, don't run it in containers. But I that's usually my answer, right? It depends, of course, right? But yeah, to your point, it's I am also not a DBA, and there's a lot that goes into sharding and HA with databases and all that type of stuff. And hence my answer is to Andre's point, right? Those containers, you should think of them as ephemeral, right? They could go away, right? Do you want your database process just to die and then another one comes back up, even if it's replicated and all that good stuff? Yeah, I think.
Well, the data. I mean, you're talking about the server that's doing the processing.
Yeah.
Again, okay. I just from what I know as my perspective, not expert, but I mean, the processor go away and come back up again. Who cares, right? You could have your actual databases in, they're stored out. You don't store them server in a container, in containers that can just get, go away and come back and have many of them or whatever. But your data actually would be in a different instance.
Oh yeah, 100%. You should definitely be persisting your data 1,000%. Yeah, more thinking around replication and sharding and those type of things where you have multiple instances, right, that are running, and then if one goes down, then it's coming back up, and then it's got to join and da da da. It's just complex, and I'm not sure.
I'm not qualified to answer that question, really.
I will say that
I'm a developer.
A beauty of it though is to our talk earlier, right? Locally running in a container, 1,000%. Dev integration.
That was my talk for DockerCon Live.
Yeah,
it was about how. So when you ask the question, I'm thinking production servers.
Oh yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah. But the talk I did for DockerCon Live, and I've done at other conferences, was about how powerful it is to be able to use SQL Server or other databases in containers for development and testing. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Huge game changer. Yeah. Just spinning up a database, running end-to-end tests, spinning them back down. I mean, it's super interesting. Yeah.
And for CI/CD.
Like
you send your code off to CI/CD, and it's going to run. It's going to spin. You get a Docker file. I mean, Docker Compose can spin up a database on the fly for you also, like the server that as needed, when just so you're not hoarding all those resources, just like, oh, I need these integration tests to be run. Okay, zoop, got a server, here's the sample database, boom 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 boom, test done, bloop, it's gone, right? That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm sure you've done this too, right? Maintaining a database that you use for integration testing and CI/CD pipeline. I mean, the data just.
No, I haven't. No way.
No, and you're glad you had aged about 50 years. It just, it's.
Oh, I'm too old to age 50 years. I'm in the ground 50 years from now.
Deos asks why Docker and Kubernetes works together. Not 100% sure how. Yeah, they do. And actually, so they're two different things, right? So Kubernetes
is the question about the companies or the technologies?
I don't know. But Kubernetes isn't a company, so Google's. Yeah, Google's. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll make it, unless you, Tejas, clarify your question for us if you would, but I'll just answer it maybe generally. So, Kubernetes is an orchestrator, and Docker is a container platform runtime, and more than that, right? So you can build images with it, you can maintain your images, you can do those type of things, and you surely can run them, right? There used to be Swarm. Swarm is still part of it, but that has moved over to Mirantis. They own that. But so in Kubernetes is more focused on running multiple containers and orchestrating, a swarm of containers. I'll mix terms in there to confuse everybody, but a big gaggle of containers. And is gaggle for geese, right? Is
Gaggle of geese.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I'm familiar with it.
Okay, we'll go with that. but so you could tell Kubernetes, hey, I want 10 instances of this container running, and it'll make sure that those 10 are up running all the time. And then, but Docker doesn't do that natively. In Swarm mode, it will. Docker just is more concerned about building your images, running one image. You can run multiple image, but not concerned about, okay, this image went down. It's your responsibility as the operator, as the programmer, developer, to make sure it comes back up, right? Docker, right. You could do ensure restart and like always restart and that type of stuff, but generally,
I've never used Kubernetes. And I know how to spell it, K8S. Right?
Yeah.
And I know basically that that's what it's for, and that and also like the maybe Google Cloud does too. I'm not as familiar with that, but so Azure has Kubernetes on Azure. AWS has Kubernetes there, but they also have their own proprietary container managers also.
Yeah, the Docker, like you were talking about earlier, the Docker ACI integration is phenomenal. It's, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Go download the desktop, and it's GA. It's generally available, and you can find it on the command line. So it's in context. I'll put a link in the show notes and stuff. But yeah,
that's the ACI is the Azure command interface.
Yeah, Azure Container Instances.
Container ACI.
Yeah,
but with Docker Compose and the and then I was thinking of the new Docker Compose with the Azure with the command line stuff.
Yeah,
all of the terms, and then I added it. I did all this stuff with AWS, and then I added in all of those acronyms also, and it's just like, oh, it's so confusing.
Oh yeah, yeah. When I last time I worked at a very large company, we had a website internally for all the acronyms, and now working at Docker, having to know GCP, AWS, Azure, right, and all their acronyms, and then their internal acronyms. Yeah, it's like I don't remember them all, believe me.
I used Azure Container Instances, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago for the first time and only time. I think that might have been in relation to, I had done a series of articles for MSDN magazine, 3 articles, because there was so much to say about using SQL Server and containers. And then I also did a big blog post, and I did an article for Docker. And because it was like taking it off, the blog post and the article were more about getting it onto the cloud. And on one of those, I used Azure Container Instances, and my recollection is that really is just handling one container at a time, though, not managing multiple ones, right? But it takes care of all of that, but it doesn't coordinate multiple containers. It was just for one-offs.
Yeah, it's definitely
one image. I think really that it's one image, really dealing with one image. Is that better to say it that way?
Yeah. And it's it's definitely production ready, right? And I think a lot of time, and probably a lot of what you do, Julie, is right. You're talking to a broad spectrum of users that have different use cases, right? So like, you might have, because there's a lot of dev teams out there that are 3 people, 5 people, right? Don't have DevOps, they don't have operate, right? They're everything. So these integrations with Docker are, really fantastic. Like you were talking about, like, oh great, I just learned all of Entity Framework. Now I learned all of Docker. Now I got to go learn all of Azure too, right? It's like, it's a lot, right? So
yep.
Allow you to deploy very easily, run it stably, right? And then build on that, right? So as more and more your features and complexity grows, then might move to a K8's managed service, right? Makes sense. We have a lot of folks asking about or talking about Swarm. Yes, so about 20% of the, I don't know. I'm a little biased though, because I have a Docker badge, so I would say maybe a little bit more than 20%, but you're probably right. Yeah, Swarm is fantastic. Swarm is fantastic. At a prior role at Docker, I was running the engineering side of our customer success, and we ran all in Swarm. I managed it, kept it up and running. I hesitate we had 5 nines, but definitely 4 nines. With me just managing it barely at all, right? It's a great orchestrator. Docker, any updates on Docker support for Apple Silicon M1? Yes.
Boy, that's
stay tuned.
current.
Stay tuned. We'll just leave it at that. Let me take that off there. I don't know. Anton, let me go check on that. I'll take a note to check on FreeBSD. To be honest with you, I don't know. It should be supported. No, BSD. Let me go check on it. Let me check on it. I'm not sure. But what you could do, here's thank you, Anton, for setting up my plug for go to our roadmap, public roadmap. It's on here. I'll put it on the screen if I type it out real quick. Let's see if I can remember it. HTTPS: github.com Docker roadmap. And come on, tool. So if you go there, Anton, and add, if you don't see it in there, add it in there, and then like it. That's our public roadmap. Our product team looks at it all the time. Our engineering team, execs even use that. Look at that roadmap, right? That is our roadmap. So put a ticket in there, an issue in there, and we'll definitely take a look at it. And encourage your coworkers, peers, tribe to make comment on it, and I think it's a thumbs up on there. I'll have to go look, because I always say like it, but I don't think that's the equivalent on GitHub. But anyways, yeah, go in there, and but I'll also talk to the engineering team. Awesome. So we're coming up on right at the end here. If anybody out there listening has any questions for Julie, please put them in the chat, and we can address them. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, Crazy Max, Swarm. Depends on your use case, but Storm is definitely still relevant. It's a great orchestrator. It really is. And I tell a lot of people, especially if you're managing and you're going to be doing your own things internally, right? You're running your own private cloud. Start with Swarm, and then progress in the Kubernetes if need be, right? The barrier to entry, the learning curve for Kubernetes is high. It's super, super powerful. So I would highly recommend starting.
It's a good resource for taking, if you already are familiar with working with Docker, like to go to the next step for management and learn about Kubernetes. Some good resources? Of course, I'll always plug Pluralsight.
Yeah, Pluralsight. I forget there's a couple great courses on Udemy also. Mm-hmm. I actually think Brett Fisher's course on Udemy, his Docker course also covers Kubernetes. So, it does start out very, very basic in the beginning. Just takes you all the way through Docker, but there's some great Kubernetes stuff in there too. I don't know. I'll hit my microphone. I'll go. They're an old an old colleague of mine at Docker. He's now somewhere else, but he wrote a really good blog series on Kubernetes. I'll post that in the show notes too. That's a really good tutorial to kind of understand all the concepts and get kind of tactical with it and pulling the levers and writing YAML if you can stand it. Yeah, I'm kind of like you, Julie.
Space. Wait, need another space.
Yeah, yeah. Then you got to turn on in your editor to see if there's spaces or tabs, and is it? Yeah. Almost fun. But anyways, yeah, I'm not a Kubernetes expert either. I've definitely used it and know it pretty well, but I haven't run huge clusters of Kubernetes in production, right? To really become an expert, I think that's to my earlier point, right? You got to go through the fire. You got to, and that doing it in production will we'll put you through the fire for sure. Okay, we got 1 more minute. I'm going to ask you this one question. I have my rapid questions I wanted to ask, but you're lucky. They're just off. But I do love to hear this one. Okay, so are you primarily C sharp?
C sharp.
C sharp. Okay. So what is your, well, I won't assume C sharp is your favorite. So what is your favorite programming language, but it can't be C sharp? Not the one you primarily use. Like say Microsoft for whatever reason said, we don't, you know what, we're going away from C sharp.
You know, it's really bad because I mostly spend all my time in C sharp. So favorite, I can't say,
what would you like to learn?
I haven't used so many languages. I would love to, you know, if on my list of all the things I'd like to be able to spend time with, I have always been curious to dive into one of the functional languages just to have an understanding of the power behind them.
Yeah. I'm with you. I haven't, I've said this like 15 times on here. Go. I mean, I know Go and I can, you know, develop mildly in it, but yeah, I'd really want to understand Go a lot more, right? I think there's a bunch of power in there that I'm missing just from being handicapped from coming from other languages, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, and here I am saying I don't use a lot of different languages, although, you know, I still have to code in VB and, you know,
you mentioned
JavaScript, I've done Node and stuff like that. But the ability, what you learn from using other languages also is so powerful. When I was making my foray into JavaScript and Node, I felt like I grew my understanding of what's going on in programming because of that, because I was always stuck in one way. So it just gave me a different perspective on programming concepts and what's going on under the covers. And the more you do that with different languages, the smarter you become about doing that, and also using the right tool for the job, right? I know, like, I have a lot of friends who do F# programming, and one of the important things they have, many of them have often said is, look, you don't make, you know, as a .NET programmer, you don't need to make a choice between C# and F#. You need to understand what their powers are and use C# for what it's good at, and then use F# for, you know, usually for, you know, solving some really hard problems.
Yeah. I agree. That's yeah, fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
It's fun.
I really, really appreciate it. Tell folks where they can find you online. I
spend a stupid amount of time on Twitter, and I'm at Julie Lerman, just the same way as you spell my name there, on Twitter. And yeah, there's my my website. My blog's on my website. I don't blog much because I put out, you know, now instead of writing on my blog, I, you know, write articles in Pluralsight, and the rest is just Twitter. Blah.
Yeah, cool. I'm gonna put your Twitter up there too. But yeah, and you get to see you have some really good posts in beautiful, is it Vermont?
Yes, I live in Vermont.
Beautiful Vermont.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're gonna have you back again.
Yep.
Thanks for everybody watching live. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week, next Thursday, same time, same bat channel. See y'all.